Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse, and in today's segment, we are going to unpack a pretty serious topic, and that is invoking the curse upon our nation. I've been sitting and thinking on this one for a while, and there's some things I need to get off my chest. So you may want to grab you a koozie cup full of something and sit down with me a spell. We're going to talk about a few things, namely things we need to prepare for, because our government is single-handedly screwing the pooch on pretty much everything they possibly can. So what else is new? We have been riding the tiger since really after World War II. The things that I need to unpack today are not only the effects of the sunsetting of the Marshall Plan. Number 2, the weaponization of the dollar and how this is coming home to roost now. 3, the corrupt judges and the system of justice that we have here in the United States. And 4, the international meddling, warmongering, adventurism, and meddling in sovereign nations, and also particularly in the land of Israel, that culminated in ultimately getting an American Marine Corps veteran shot this last week, who happens to be one of my friends. So, let's talk. Riding the tiger. The United States' post-World War II hegemonic status, meaning the big kid on the block, we always win, we're a force for good in the world, this whole narrative that we have been comfortably existing in an economy in the United States that was propped up by the victory in World War II, number 1, and then secondarily, the weaponization of the dollar and the usage of the dollar via lending programs, also known as the Marshall Plan, to rebuild Europe. This caused us to have an unparalleled amount of prosperity and of basically the equivalent of cocaine injected into the economy, where people are feeling good, they're high on life, we have a baby boom, which now is becoming a bust. And all of the effects of an economy that was ramped up for war production, that had all of this capability for production. And then suddenly, after we didn't have an enemy to fight anymore, they're like, oh gosh, our centrally planned economy that isn't technically supposed to be central planned, but really de facto is from the Federal Reserve, since we ceded our right to printage and coining money away from Congress and into the hands of private central bankers. They figured, oh gee whiz, wow, this is great that we have all this production, but now we don't have an enemy to fight anymore. At least one that we can actively sell to the American people. So here's what let's do. Let's take this dollar, and instead of putting a whole bunch of warm bodies all throughout Europe to keep the peace, we're going to use our dollar as a weaponized currency to get them indebted to us, and then they have to use our dollar to build up their economies again and essentially restructure. This worked for a long time. Most of the people alive who are watching this video have been living in an economy that has directly benefited as a result of this plan being implemented and ultimately succeeding. I mean, it did succeed. For the limited time that they wanted it to work, it worked. The problem is they got us riding the tiger, and now we got to get off of it, and we can't. We can't. Everyone listening to this right now is listening within the context, if you've grown up in the United States, of a world where we win. Granted, you can say Vietnam didn't quite work out. Korea was a tie. Iraq and Afghanistan, for what? Now we are seeing that what they tried to do to keep our economy propped up and to keep a testy peace in the world, they can't keep it going. And all these think tanks, Brookings Institute, Cato, Rand, these people who have lots of fancy degrees after their name, who sit in think tanks and write up position papers to effectively keep our hegemonic status going, the only option that these guys have is war, folks. So they're already expecting that we're going to be in conflict with China, because there is, throughout the cycle of history, there is always an established power, the hegemon, and then you have a challenging upstart hegemon. When you look, there's actually a really good book called Destined for War that speaks about this. But folks, without belaboring the point too much, we are at a major transition point. There is no way out of this except for war. Or hyperinflation, which ultimately will still end up in more global instability and war, which is going to have effects serially down the line, the chain for commodities, and also for a lot of other secondary factors associated with that. I really don't think people understand the effects of not only the Marshall Plan sunsetting, the baby boomers aging out of the workforce, their children not being able to afford to work to pay all the entitlements that the 1930s generation wrote down that they were owed. I mean, this thing is really setting up for some problems. Now, before I get into the corruptness and like the moral aspect of this, let's take this in isolation for a second, just for a second here. We could say, for instance, okay, you know what? Foreign policy sucks. Monetary policy, probably not the best situation, but functionally we're a moral and God-fearing people. God will work it out for us. Can we say that anymore? The Tytler cycle of history, for those of you who are fans of history, you will note there is a cycle that decadence brings about dependence, and dependence, bondage. This decadence, this hedonism that we have all grown up in, and in one way, shape, or form, we have all participated in it, right? So nobody's innocent here, and I'm not casting blame on any particular one individual. Corporately, as a whole, the prosperity that we have enjoyed has brought about a culture so comfortable that they compare chopping off, or I should say, not a state not being willing to use tax dollars or to fight in courts functionally, parents chopping off their children's genitals. They compare that to a genocide. They equate that, the refusal of parents to mutilate their children and turn them into something else, gender-affirming healthcare, they equate that with the slaughter of millions of Jews, Christians, political dissidents, and anyone who didn't suit either the Nazi Party or Stalin's reign of terror. This is what they're equivocating. The version of justice that we have has become so warped that there's no functional way, aside from massive repentance, for us to dig ourselves out of this. The people are one thing. The government is also another point to consider here. We get the government in one way, shape, or form of what we deserve, either because the body politic and the electorate decide that they want a government comprised of people like Nancy Pelosi, like Chuck Schumer, like Joe freaking Biden, who, by the way, if I showed up drunk to work, I would still be batting way ahead of Joe. Joe can't form a cohesive sentence. If I showed up as a nurse to perform patient care in the state of mind that he exists in every day, I would be fired. But he sits at the head of the nuclear codes. Isn't that reassuring? Are we getting the government we deserve? Or is this something that's just happening in isolation? I submit to you that this cycle that we're experiencing right now is one of consequence. Not only have we become a decadent people, it is not bad to have stuff. Stuff inherently is not an evil thing. Material is only a facilitator for mankind's wishes and whims. We, however, have become so comfortable, so thoroughly unneeding of a God or of an objective system of morality that we have rejected him. We've rejected his commandments, for sure. Is it any wonder then that we get a government that ultimately has decided it is not satisfied with foreign adventurism? It's not satisfied with occupying Europe. It's not satisfied. I wasn't there, by the way. Like, perhaps the people who crafted the Marshall Plan, perhaps they really thought that they were doing the best thing. Perhaps when confronted with all of the information and realities on the back end, they thought, you know what, at least we'll buy our children some time. Maybe we'll buy them time enough to have some grandkids to enjoy a little bit before things get really dicey. It's probably what they thought, in my opinion, if we give people the benefit of the doubt. But now that the United States has become so embroiled in foreign adventurism and in international meddling and in telling sovereign nations what to do and then taking tax dollars and sending it to Ukraine, a place with which we have no business whatsoever in interfering, that is not in any way, shape, or form justifiable. It's not a border to us. We don't have any business being there. nonetheless, we're taking hundreds of millions of dollars of packages of weapons, et cetera, and sending it over to them. Meanwhile, we can't fund domestic programs here at home. Does that make any sense? Oh, yes, it does. If the foundations are corrupted, what can the righteous do? Our government has devolved in its outlook, and it has lost fidelity to the original version. So much so to the point that now, of all the places that it possibly could be meddling, it has chosen to thoroughly meddle inside the state of Israel. So this last week, my friend, David Stern, is a United States Marine Corps veteran, and his wife, Rachel, who are American citizens, residents of Itamar, a settlement in Israel with whom I have many friends, and a place that I have visited numerous times. My friend was shot by Palestinian terrorists in the village of Hawara. Why does this have anything to do with the United States and foreign policy and just hold on. People have such an obsession, unfortunately, with brevity that they seek to really understand an issue in all of its facets. Rarely are things straight and cut to the point, condensable in 30 seconds and TikTok-worthy posts. Dave was shot multiple times by Palestinian terrorists. He and his wife, Rachel, were going on the one road, by the way, that connects their village to Jerusalem. There is no other way to go. So as they're going through the Palestinian terrorist village of Hawara, which was not pre-existent, by the way, to their home, they stop at a crosswalk, and a man crosses the crosswalk. Dave, who's a United States Marine Corps veteran, and whose table I sat at, the last conversation that I had with them, sitting at their dinner table, was talking about the mindset and the necessity of preparedness and the diligence that responsible people have in carrying a firearm every day to defend themselves. That it is a birthright, particularly of Americans. I mean, it's enshrined in our Constitution, but also it is the natural right of human beings. They're paused at this crosswalk. Dave sees dude crossing. He's like, his arm looks wonky, so he puts his hand on his pistol. Dude turns around and with an improvised submachine gun empties it into their car. Dave gets in the fight. Freaking amazing, dude. Awesome friend. Way to go. Despite being shot in the head and multiple times in the arm, shoots the dude, is able to get the car in gear, get out of the kill zone, which if you've ever been to this village of Hawara, this thing was built to kill Jews. It literally was built to kill Jews. Used to be nothing. 2 stores. They got 3 nice little roundabouts, also known as choke points, built it up around them so they could throw boulders down and shatter my friends' cars and shoot my friends. Oh, by the way, all this was paid for with your tax dollars. Did you know that? The United States, in the midst of all of our other foreign meddling, they give money to terrorists who end up killing American citizens. Great job, Joe Biden. Oh, but they really care about Americans. There's more. Dave gets the car in gear. They go for it. A couple 100 yards, get out of the kill zone. Dave is awesome. Carries a blowout kit, tourniquets himself, tries to stop the bleeding, and getting the cravat and start to plug the wound. Get the bleeding stopped and then plug the wound. Now you would think, right, that the so-called innocents and bystanders who are unaffected, right, and who are really just good people, that they would actually want to help a person who was shot for no reason, just randomly. You know, the only crime being Jews in a car stopped at a pedestrian space. No, for 8 minutes. And by the way, I'll put a link to this in the description box below to Rachel's narrative. For 8 minutes, this car was surrounded with people, had their cameras, like laughing at them, jeering at them, whistling at them, filming them, watching them die. Nobody stepped in to help. So when the ambassador, the United States ambassador, connects with them, more of the same nonsense. More money for terrorists. More money for foreign adventurism. More money functionally is going to try and divide the land of Israel. Now I ask you, you could, okay, fair enough. You could say that the modern government of Israel is in some way, shape, or form not living up to its biblical mandates. I'll give you that. Okay? But the people of Israel and the land of Israel, those are not up for debate. Those are God's forever. His covenant rests upon the land and the people forever, unbreakable. And he made the covenant originally to Abraham. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And in you all nations shall be blessed. So then I ask you, the one thing that we could have reasonable hope for as far as a restoration or some type of prolonging of our benefits as a hegemonic status would be to fall back on morality and biblical observance and a fear of God, ultimately, at the bare minimum, not to curse God's people. But that is not what happened this last week. The United States ambassador shafted a United States Marine Corps veteran who was shot by terrorists who were financed with U.S. tax dollars. In the midst of that, the United States has decided that it wanted to conspire with other Arab countries surrounding Israel to try and further divide the land and to halt the lawful settling and building of homes of Jewish people in the land that is historically theirs, that is theirs by right and by international law. Going back to our point here earlier about riding the tiger. If the foundations be shaken, what can the righteous do? I've chewed on this one for a while, guys. Whether or not I should speak about these things, the United States as a nation is dead. Regions are alive. People are alive. The United States as a national entity, as far as a force for good in the world, has been dead for some time. It is in its final death throes. The only thing keeping us afloat is the life support of international indebtedness based on the dollar, our fiat currency. I submit to you that we have a long-suffering God who hears the prayers of his people and who has a heart for the righteous among the nations wherever they are. His forbearance is the only thing that has allowed us to exist and perpetuate our state. But as we have turned our back on him, as we have repeatedly provoked him and sought to divide his land and curse his people, turn our back upon his covenant, reject his law, how is it that we can expect the blessing and the prosperity of recent times without the morality incumbent upon us as a responsibility living in a constitutional republic? John Adams himself said it, that the Constitution is only written for a moral and religious people. It is wholly unsuitable to any other. As the nation dominated by these cities, bastions of liberalism, where Jefferson said men go to devour each other, as this nation is having its tempo set by leftist-dominated governments in cities, by totalitarian tyrants, who through various different ways have ensured that elections are suspect at a minimum, and who now are so thoroughly corrupt and devoid of morality that they are weaponizing the state against parents who would seek to raise their children with sanity and with norms about basic things like what is a man and what is a woman, biological facts. If the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? We are headed for severe judgment. I've sat on this and I have been hesitant to speak with the degree of severity that I have felt for quite some time. Seeing the Biden administration's ambassadors handling of the attempted murder of one of this nation's finest, a very patriotic American. You're not going to argue someone's patriotism who served in the United States Marine Corps. Like, really? Having the ambassador shaft them, the way that the ambassador treated my friends, people whose land I have walked on and whose table I have sat at. That just brought it into a fresh focus for me. That made it real for me. A little bit longer video, but you know what? Like, I'm not after the TikTok group. Nope. I ain't after the 90% of people who are unswayed by history and who are just numbers, ultimately. This channel is dedicated to you. This channel is dedicated to people who think, to people who pray, to people who act and feel, and who are bound by a morality that is more than just transient passing winds of prevailing ideology. A morality that is rooted in the immutable, unchanging word of God and in the scriptures, which do not change from generation to generation, because our God does not change. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. His people are the same yesterday, today, and forever. His land is his land. It was always his land. It will always be his land. And when the United States of America comes against his land, our covering is going to be dropped, our hedge will be removed, our protection will be revoked. The people inside this land who fear God and who desire to keep his commandments and to be obedient to him, what then for us? I submit to you, we have been born in a time, in a place, in a season such as this for a reason. Each person's reason is different. We are all but threads in a tapestry, and we'll figure it out on the other side. My goal is just to be obedient with what's in front of me and to do the best I can each day, as is yours, obviously, because you're here. How do we prepare for this? How do we prepare for what is coming upon us? There are different personal hells that people live through. Financial, sociological, environmental, catastrophic change, God forbid, can happen in the blink of an eye. I want to be found a good and faithful servant. I want to be found worthy of my charge. I want to be found at that day of judgment that I have been about the Lord's work, to be about the Father's business. How do we do this in challenging times? Number one, work out your faith. Number two, be about action. We marry together faith and action. Long ago, there was a preacher named Charles Hayden Spurgeon who had a newsletter he put out. The newsletter was called The Sword and Trowel, reference to the book of Nehemiah, to build and fight. If you want to build something for God, if you want to build a legacy, if you want to shield yourself in times of trouble, we do it with the sword and with the trowel. We build proactively, and we're ready to fight. This is a perfect dovetailing into preparedness, beans, bullets, and band-aids. I want to position myself, and I want to encourage my followers and the people who are with me on this channel. We do this. We prep, we store food, we're willing to defend ourselves, we're willing to carry firearms, we're willing to be diligent in our preparedness therewith in defense. And we're willing to focus on medical preparedness as well, because we believe in sustaining life. All of this dovetails into the Father's work and ultimately into the commandments. For it is written, by them you shall live. We are about life. Our enemy is about death. This government, the United States federal government, particularly led by the Biden administration, is about death. They are not about life. What is it? What is it about any of their policies that has furthered life and good and beneficence over the past years that they've been in control? Nothing. I have no confidence in them, nor any entity associated with them. The less that we depend upon them in the future, the better. If I can avoid going into their grid for healthcare, being dependent upon them or any number to call for somebody to come up and save me, I want to avoid being dependent upon that. The beans, bullets, and the band-aids. Storing up your food, having at least 3 months worth of food stored up, having an eye towards production, doing what you can, even if it's just one little tomato plant on the back porch, doing what you can. You put your hand to the plow and you go towards it. Bullets. Obviously, y'all know where I sit on this one. I carry a firearm everywhere I go. I'm unapologetic about that. And I'm not content to just be relegated to a sidearm. I'm a big fan of the rifle. The rifle is ultimately what made this country free. Of course, God had a big part in this, right? But we have a responsibility. Being willing to work, being willing to set yourself towards standards, being willing to drill, being willing to do dry practice, be about it. And the third, the band-aids. The medical preparedness side of the house. Healthcare is going to be increasingly weaponized politically in the days to come. Look back towards COVID. Y'all know this to be true. Shortages are going to be a thing. Shortages of intellectual capital, shortages of material, shortages of just having reference materials. How much of our stuff, nurses, doctors, EMTs, paramedics, chiropractors, dentists, anyone out there, how much of our stuff is in the cloud? Answer, like 90% of it. Where's all of our reference stuff? In the cloud. Who looks up their drug interactions anywhere but in the cloud anymore? How many of us actually have a drug reference sitting somewhere in the nurse's station or in the back of the ambulance? Precious few. Technically, it's there in theory. We don't know. The medical preparedness side of the house is essential. We have to be able to take care of people. And by the way, it's important that if you are the healer, that you got someone to take care of you. Because I can attest, having recently recovered from norovirus, that was not fun, that it sucks to be sick as the healer, because trying to give instructions to someone to help you in the midst of not being so with it is not the best plan. So it's important to have someone to care for your healer as well in the group. Folks, I have really put it out there today. I just told you straight how I think about it. There is a biblical principle. In Hebrew, it's called Mida Keneged Mida. I'll say it for you again. Mida Keneged Mida. Literally translated, measure for measure. Mida Keneged Mida. There is a biblical principle here. God is just in all he does. If we attempt to do what we, and are successful in doing what we've done, do we really think that we're going to skirt his judgment, his righteous judgment? He sees all. He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. He rewards those who keep his commandments and punishes those who transgress them. That is the foundation of justice. Recompense for good and punishment, consequence for wrong. He would not be a righteous judge if he allowed us to perpetuate this. There will be consequences for us as a nation. My hope is to be prepared to be a blessing and a light in times of darkness. I hope the video was helpful for y'all today. If you did enjoy the video, I hope you'll subscribe to me here on YouTube, Patriot Nurse. If you would like to hear more about what happened to my friend David Stern and Rachel, his wife, I'm going to put a bunch of links in the description box below, because it's very important that you be aware of this. I believe as we look back in the years to come, that this event moving forward is going to be viewed as a seminal event. Very, very critical. So I hope you'll subscribe to me here on YouTube. You can also support me and stay with me on Patreon, Subscribe Star, Cryptocurrency, PayPal. Got links below. Let's talk about training. You want to train online? Can't come to meet me in person? 4 hours, $129. That link's down below. So that class is a really, really great Foundations of Medical Prep class. Get you started, get your head in the game, get you thinking, get you learning practical things that are going to help you be more self-sufficient in caring for your family. The benefit with coming to meet me in class is, well, A, I'm there. Number two, you get to meet like-minded people in your area and network. And I tell you what, I got some of the best students in the world who show up to class. So that's definitely a more in-depth setting. You learn more in class, obviously, because I've got you for 2 to 4 days. The 2 and 4 day classes are really the backbone. I also have a 3-day class, which is Herbal Theory and Preparation with Patriot Nurse. And that one is only taught twice a year. I taught it in January, and then I will be teaching, Lord willing, another one in July. So I got the links to all of those at the website, thepatriotnurse.com. Guys, make training a priority. Take care of yourself and be about the Father's business, right? He wins at the end of things. He is faithful to keep his commandments. And I'm confident that I'm here for a purpose. And if I show up and do what I'm supposed to do, he's got it. But I got to be faithful and get in it, what he puts in front of me. Hope the video was a blessing. Have a great week, guys. May the Lord bless and keep you all. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later. Mwah! Bye.